right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for coming here. Um, let's see. I think our first agenda item is to approve the minutes from last time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay. Great. Everyone who approves, say aye.
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 Aye. Great. I just realized that I didn't open up for public comment, but I don't know if anybody had any public comments. We have a couple guests here today.
And all of them are, I believe, related to the recruitment, but yeah, I don't see anybody else,
Okay.
any other members from the public here.
Okay.
But
I saw some familiar faces.
yeah, let me just check the waiting room just a second. But yeah, I don't see anybody else, Laura. I think we're good.
Okay, great. So the agenda items are the decertification of the current police officer eligibility list and the approval of the hiring process and timetable. And I believe those are both of those an open session.
In the past, we've done them in open session.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that wasn't on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Great. So unless anybody has any objections, let's roll into the first one and I will let you lead that item. If you don't mind.
Yeah, so we have exhausted, in our opinion, our current eligibility list. Jeremy and Travis, please hop in here if you have any comments or if I miss anything, but I think we've interviewed, was it 18 people on our current list, and we think that the list is no longer containing viable candidates. I have 2 offers of employment out to the last 2 candidates on that list, and we think it's time to start to decertify this list and start a new recruitment.
Okay. Any comments from anybody on the committee?
Just to clarify, so this means once it's decertified, then you can host or open up for more submissions.
Yeah, we can start a brand new recruitment and start that eligibility list. We just feel again that the current list is exhausted. We don't have any other viable candidates on there.
Sounds reasonable to me. And so what's the process for then? I guess the next item is the timetable. So maybe I'll hold off questions about the process in the next item. Is there, you are requesting a motion from us to decertify the current list?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to decertify the list.
I'll second it.
Okay. Great. Any discussion? All right. Are we ready to vote? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, it's decertified. All right. And then the next item is the approval process for a timetable.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. I will give a brief statement, then I'll turn it over to Jeremy and Brian, our HR director for the city, who have been working on the process. So as we just mentioned, we feel like the current or the last list, we've exhausted that we need to start a new recruitment. We currently don't have any openings, but there are some rumors that there are others looking to leave, possibly some retirements. We don't know exactly when that's going to occur. So we want to be ready for that. As I think I've told members of this board before, it takes us a long time to hire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 that we just hired at the end of 2020, and actually they're both in 2020, were actually replacement for Chuck Volk and for Robert Meyer, who retired in early 2020, but it takes us that long to hire somebody. So we want to be prepared that if we have another opening, that we have people on a list that we can start interviewing, we can do those backgrounds, and hopefully they're certified, we can plug them in quicker than starting a process, being behind 3 months, and then being further behind in trying to fill those holes. So that's kind of the background on why we want to start a new recruitment. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy and Brian, who can explain the process a little bit more.
Sure, thanks. One additional thing that the chief didn't mention is he looked back and he told me since 2007, despite, since 2007, there's only been 2 years that we have not hired somebody, which is another reason why we're looking to have an eligibility list without necessarily having a position open. So we do want to be ready. Like you said, it takes a long time. The two that we have conditional offers out to right now aren't going to start. They both have to go to the academy, which means they're not going to start the academy until June, just the way those are spaced out. They're all at tech colleges, which means they're in the academy until October, which means they're in field training until February, and that's February of 22. So they're not going to count as full employees for us for literally another year. So getting ahead of that curve, and then even, we might identify candidates that have law enforcement experience and can walk right in the door if we have a vacancy right away. And because if even with 2 vacancies, there's always something that pops up, some family leave and whatnot, that when we have a vacancy, we need to fill it as quickly as possible. So inside your packet, you did get the information similar to what we have provided in the past as far as the timeline. I'm not sure if you compared it to the one that we did last year, but starting out, we just kind of changed the wording pretty significantly in the beginning as far as the information about what we're looking for, who we're looking for. And then the remainder of that document, I'm sorry, I'm looking at it on my computer as well, goes about explaining the benefits and whatnot. About from the department, and then the application process. Brian is here and he'll answer any questions on the HR end of things if you guys have them. But I've been working closely with him. We're going to change this process up a little bit. Not necessarily in the sense of what we're looking for or the application process, but behind the scenes stuff, working electronically instead of with all these paper applications, and letting the NeoGov program kind of do a lot of work for us is the ultimate goal. So hopefully that will alleviate some of what our officers have to do. But the process is, we're hoping to have live by no later than Friday here, which Brian said he should be able to do for us. And then we'll start the advertising at the same places, and we can talk about that a little bit more later on here, but most of the same places that we've advertised in the past, the community centers and whatnot. And then Brian has some resources as well through the HR end of things that he's going to assist us with. But the application process will be open for approximately 1 month, which is consistent with what we had the last time as well. And if you kind of scroll through some of that stuff, some of those dates, that puts us tentatively offering employment to somebody around June, and then starting a background and all of the necessary testing. So hopefully around June we would be ready to go, and that's a moving target. So we're certainly not stuck on that. And the academy, like I kind of explained earlier, so it's a 17-week academy now. To work kind of around holidays. Most of the tech colleges start a class in January, and then they start a class in August. And it's about 5 months. Excuse me, there are a couple of academies that start in June. They have a staggered academy start date. So that's where we have 2 spots reserved at actually Fox Valley Tech to send the people we currently offered. But this timeline would potentially make it possible that we could get anybody who needed to go to the academy into an August academy, hopefully more local. So just going through there, we also, Brian did all the work on the classification, the class specification bulletin, which is also included in that packet, which is very similar to the information we used to include in the packet, but also a lot more detailed, and I'm sure covers a lot of the things that he wished probably would have been covered in the past. Thanks for your help on that, Brian. And then the scoring matrix, which is Brian is actually going to incorporate into the NeoGov program so that the officers, let me rewind actually. So we have every application reviewed by 2 officers, and they go over this scoring matrix and score each one of those questions that we ask on the initial application. And then we set a threshold, and then we invite the top candidates for interviews. And last time we did that, we had, 91 applications, which is actually slightly more than the year before, which is a bit of a surprise given the state of the country last year. So hopefully we can get some good applicants. Each one of those then is scored twice, and then we take an average score, which is how we then pick the candidates that we're going to bring in for an interview. Some of the things that did change, and this is again in consultation with Brian here, is everything adds up to 100 now, which makes it a little bit easier, he said, for his NeoGov program. And so to make that work, we had changed and you'll see the numbers don't exactly add up, but they add up to the number of the questions don't necessarily make a lot of sense when you're looking at them there, but they correspond to the questions on the application. We are giving credit this time for the academy completed. That will give us potentially an opportunity to identify candidates who are certified and can fill a vacancy as quickly as possible. The work experience has been, just overall work experience outside of law enforcement has been decreased, the point totals for that. There's still a significant amount of points available for somebody in a criminal justice field other than a patrol function, such as somebody who might work in corrections or security. And then there's going to be some significant points for patrol officer or deputy experience. We did talk about that. Number 12 is listed the prior terminations, resignations. The reason we included that is because we've seen periodically we'll see local officers who have been terminated or have resigned in lieu of termination applying for our agency. And we want to be able to account for something like that, but also, as we've discussed in the past, it's not, if this was somebody who got terminated from McDonald's 10 years ago when they were in high school, we're not significantly concerned about that. Oh, you popped that up. Let me minimize mine now. Thank you. And then most of those have stayed consistent. The Spanish is heavier weighted for a bilingual officer, just because that's more common, the most common language that we face on the streets. And then, but we do give points for another language as well. And then the 19 through 25 are all the essay questions that we've asked in the past. We find that we think those are very important questions that we ask about those topics. I did reduce 24 and 25, used to be also 10 points, but those we found have not been necessarily as significant, the answers that we're getting anyway. And then the overall technical quality of the application. Some people spend 5 minutes, I think, applying, and then other people certainly spend a significant amount of time filling out the application, making sure it's done well. So we want to give people credit for that as well. So that's a very basic summary of our process. Brian, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
I'm open to answer any questions. My goal as the HR manager for the city is to help the department manage this, which can be a really intensive process with a lot of steps and a lot of manual work, so that it takes less work for Jeremy and the rest of the officers and for Troy to get through this. So I'm trying to lift some of the steps off of their back that can be managed by me, and also automate a number of the steps using the software we have available so that it's more consistent, transparent, and simpler for them to process through. So those are some of the things that I worked with Jeremy on in revising, not so much the basic recruitment process, but just the tools that we're using to get it through it.
Toby?
Yeah, I got a question for you, Jeremy. So higher score is seen more favorably, correct?
Yes.
And so I'm having trouble with 12. When I
Yep.
when I got the packet and I was looking over the packet, I'm like, oh, these should be negatives, not positives.
Yeah. No. And Brian, I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, the program can't work with negative numbers. It only works with positive numbers. So the instructions for scoring that it'll be a retrograde scoring. So if there are issues, it's 0. No issues, it would be a 2. So different from the rest of the scoring, it's retrograde. It moves backwards.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Paul?
Thanks. I know we seem to cover this every time, but I think it's worth covering it every time. What are we doing to reach out to diverse communities to try to attract particularly officers of color, but also, female officers?
Yeah, great question. And we do, so our community awareness officer, Tom Wilson, we normally will hand deliver applications to all of the Dane County community centers. Last time he couldn't do that because of COVID around the time we were doing it, but he did make contact with them and it was distributed. We do some advertising. Hold on, I gotta minimize my screen now. I pulled up what we advertised last year. And again, I've been working with Brian and identifying some of these other options here, but our biggest pull is from WileyNet, which is a Wisconsin law enforcement network. And that's where most people in the state of Wisconsin and elsewhere are looking, but it's only there for the people that know it's there. We have not had luck with the newspapers. I think most of the demographic we're looking for, the age group, is just not looking at print media anymore. And it's actually a pretty costly advertisement, but we advertise in the National Minority Update. We've worked for Department of Workforce Development, let's see, NeoGov. We did Urban League last year, Government Jobs, League of Wisconsin Municipalities, Handshake, which is at my understanding UW universities, obviously our social media, the NAACP. We tried the Black Troopers Association, but never got a response from them. Centro Hispano, and again, then those neighborhood centers. We are certainly open to any recommendations that anybody has. We haven't had great luck. I can tell you that the demographic numbers that we got last year, I was able to get 89 responses out of the 91 apps, and a total of 20 out of those 89 identified as either a minority or two or more races. I think, we could certainly improve on that. We'd love to see improvement on that. And we only had 11 female applicants out of those 89 that responded as well. So we're trying. I'm not sure we're hitting our mark, or certainly not doing as best as or as well as we'd hope, but we're reaching out.
Yeah, I have some suggestions. I'm an engineering professor. I do a lot of for diversity, equity, inclusion, and I would just say posting the ads is it's good that you're posting in all those places, but it's usually not something that really yields results. So I would, and it takes a lot of time and effort to go beyond that, but it's about building relationships, getting to know people, knowing who to call, to reach out, having personal conversations, urging people to apply. But there's probably some like workflows and new things that can be added. And there's a lot of some organizations for police. I'm sure they're just like the organizations I belong to. They might have like subdivisions for,
Sure.
And I show up to the Minority Issues Forum student poster session, and I mingle with people. And eventually I start building a professional network, and some of those things help. It's probably a little bit different there, but sometimes it's knowing the people that know the people.
Sure.
But a lot of the people you're recruiting are sort of new. The other thing I would mention is the website. We can talk about that later. Is your website inviting for anybody who does their homework? So like, what are the things that are outward facing? The website's just one example. And then, I've been checking out some of these, and maybe you know about the UW-Madison's efforts here because they're in Dane County, but a lot of police organizations are having like, and I would encourage you to do this, like what they do for equity. And of course, it's way beyond recruiting, but it's a great recruiting tool just because, diversity and equity are so cross-cutting. And, we talked about the training, the accreditation, the body cameras, the sharing of the data publicly. These are all really good efforts being made, but just kind of putting them in one place can send a really powerful message to applicants, potentially. I could go on, but I don't want to waste everybody's time.
No, we're certainly willing to listen to any suggestions any of you guys have. I'm sure the chief stand for him as well, but anybody wants to call me, email me or whatever and offer any suggestions, I'm very willing to listen. So we'd love to expand. Yeah,
it's a multi-year effort. You kind of work towards it. You make small improvements every year.
Sure.
It's not really a magic bullet.
Yeah.
And Laura, you make a great point, and it is a multi-year thing. And unfortunately, last year was kind of a waste. We couldn't get accomplished a lot of things that we were hoping for. There are some preliminary discussions with some other police departments that maybe we should do a joint recruitment, Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, DeForest, and then also collaborating with Madison College, looking to diversify our applicant pool. So there are some preliminary discussions of how can we reach more candidates and more diversified candidates. The problem with that is that then we're all fighting for those same candidates when they're on that hiring list. And we are right now, we are all fighting for the candidates. One of the officers we just hired, she was being recruited by a number of other departments, and luckily we have a couple of our employees who work for the academy and former employees too, and they put in some good words for us. So when I gave her the conditional offer, she jumped on that knowing our reputation, but we're all fighting for those same candidates. So, and it's going to get tougher as we move forward. There's going to be less candidates getting into law enforcement, and I'm really worried about the profession as we move forward. But some good
Yeah.
points.
I think there was something structural. I know Terry's gonna say something, but before I forget, I thought you did something structural last year. I'm trying to remember in terms of the scoring, in terms of if somebody had a past arrest and it wasn't, they could still be eligible to be an officer. And so you kind of removed a barrier. And I thought that was a really good step of something structural and meaningful. I don't know. Terry, were you going to say something? You're unmuted.
Yeah, I was just looking back at an older screening worksheet and kind of comparing, and I do like some of the changes that you've a lot of the changes you've made. I think are really good. I think concerned is too strong a word. I'm curious, maybe is a better word. The screening worksheet now is weighted really, really heavily on prior criminal justice or policing experience. With is it possible to put the criteria worksheet back up or the screening worksheet back up? Because I think the first three are worth like 24 or some, I can't remember exactly. Wait, okay, no, so 14, no. So work experience full or part-time, the number 9. So that's just anything. But if someone has patrol experience, they might get a 5 in that one, and a 10 in number 11, and a 5 in number 10. I mean, they still might get a 5 in number 10 if they. So I'm wondering about the reasoning behind that. So I thought, will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it goes along with, it is kind of, we're not necessarily trying to concentrate on certified candidates, but given the circumstance and the situation we'll be in, without knowing whether or not we're going to have a position available, there's a couple of thoughts. Is one, if they have that certification, they have the experience, perhaps they're not in a hurry to look for the first job that's offered to them in another agency. So those people might stick on that list a little bit longer. The problem we've had in the past is those really qualified candidates, we might have 5 or 10 of them on that list of 20. And by the time we have those vacancies, we'd love to hire 5 of them, but we don't have them, and they've been pulled. The best candidates are generally pulled off. As far as your scoring, so 9 is, you're right, you could get 9 and 11. 10 is work experience outside of the patrol function. So those points would not be included. So that would be jobs, perhaps they did have a job as a corrections officer or a security worker at UW hospital or something. Those would count as points. And if they got a law enforcement job after that, then those would both be counted.
Right. Yeah, I understand it. It's a lot easier sometimes and wonderful to have someone that comes in with experience, but I wonder if we might be losing some of the more diverse candidates if we weight that so heavily. What other people think on the commission?
Crossed my mind too. I'd like to see, how people tend to score and see a few sample scores, and then I could get a sense of the distribution. I know I'm such a nerd, but I like to see some sample numbers to see, because sometimes, maybe everybody scores the same in some of the categories. And so they don't, like, only some of the questions move the needle perhaps.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. I think, and also Terry, are there certain ones that really do move the needle? you know, does everybody always get 10 points on 21, 22, and 23? So those don't really mean as much. So maybe having some de-identified, maybe the past certified list, de-identifying it so we can look at and see how this is broken down. And then also of that, the certifying list, or I forget what it's actually called, we had 20 people in. What is their distribution of scores? Do we only take people who scored 80 and above and those 20 went on? Or is it as from 60 to 100 and those were the 20?
I can tell you that in just a minute here.
And while you're pulling that up, I will just say that, I do like that this is kind of like holistic, and that it looks at a lot of different characteristics of applicants, and the, so somebody doesn't come in and it's like, oh, he's going to be a star, and it's like, well, what do you really base that on?
Sure.
So it's good to look at candidates holistically.
Give me just a second here. So it looks like last year's score, the top, and last year, keep in mind, was not out of 100. It was, I think, around 108 points, because the points were kind of irrelevant. It was all, comparing to each other. But the top score looks like it on the application alone was an 81.5, and the lowest total was a 60.5. So about a 21-point swing from top to bottom, and that's just for the applicants who actually got an interview.
If I can, I agree that intuitively, based on the history of experience of having a large labor pool, potential labor pool to draw from for law enforcement from communities of color, it would strike me that intuitively that favoring previous experience in law enforcement could have a disproportionate effect of weeding out candidates of color. That's what tells me intuitively, but I don't know that. And correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't a problem that we're even seeing yet, because we're not getting applicants, even applicants of color, to see if it works. Am I understanding that correctly?
I would say that's a fair assessment. Again, out of the 89 people that answered, or I had the answers for as the demographics that are not identified, with the applicants, but 69 were white, 3 identify as African American, 3 as Asian, 5 as Hispanic, and 9 as 2 or more races. So again, that adds up to a total of 20 that you could identify as minority candidates. So less than 20%.
Okay.
And just for information, that kind of demographic breakout on actual applications, not selections, but actual applications, pretty consistent across all the departments in the city. We are not a great draw, and I don't know that it is for lack of trying, because we have expanded the venues in which we have advertised and reached out. But up to this point, we have struggled in the same way with advertisements across all of the different departments in the city to attract a demographic match population to those applicants actually submitting.
I was just going to chime in quickly that, I agree with what Paul mentioned. I think that was kind of my impression as well, is that we just simply aren't getting the applicants. It's not that they're being weeded out. And that was also my impression from previous interviews, where it doesn't seem, there was quite a number of applicants that we interviewed who didn't have prior law enforcement experience, who did make it to that level and were considered. So, I guess I'm seeing that the prior law enforcement experience is what is holding us out. And, my kind of experience at UW-Madison is similar to, I think some of the things that were mentioned by Laura, which, some of which is, having individual, I guess, first off, being a location that is welcoming to minorities is usually, a starting point. And Madison as a whole doesn't have that reputation. I would imagine that Middleton has similar obstacles from that standpoint. But, just trying to, I think it again, as Laura mentioned, I think those outreach efforts is really where you can have impact, as well as by having hires who are minorities who can reach out to others and get those diverse applicants involved in the force.
I wanted to mention that, so it's like 22.5% of the candidates were people of color then, if it was 20 out of 89. And I don't know how that compares to the population of Middleton, but that actually is higher than what I thought we would have received, because the field is just dominated by white males, right? So I do still have a bit of a concern that we would be weeding out, because there are so few officers of color and women officers right now. I think if we weigh it a little bit as heavily as this is, there is that possibility. That said, well, I just wanted to make my thoughts known, and I'm okay with it, but I think we could tweak it.
And just to interject here, Terry, where would you think like we should add other points? Because I think Brian's main goal is we get to that 100, and I know Jeremy went back and forth of changing points, and I think at one point last week he was going to pull all of his hair out trying to make this work. So is there a particular area? Because where we see is that life experience, the diversity experience, that is where a lot of those candidates get points and do make up where they might not get points in the patrol officer deputy area. But that in the past, we've seen those candidates score very well in that 20, 21, 22, 23 area. So is there a particular area when you look at the scoring sheet that you think we should remove from 11, but then add to a different?
I think you just answered it, right? I think those are things that we do need to look at. Life experience, cultural diversity experience. Of course, problem solving and decision making is always important. I see that we separated out the bilingual into 2 different categories. I didn't think we did that last time. And instead of just other languages being 10, you put Spanish 7-3, Okay, we also separated out the college and education level, the GPA and educational level, right? Those used to be combined.
No, those were separate last time.
Was it 2 years ago? They were different? It might have been.
How many times?
It might have been back in 18, 19.
Oh, okay. That could be. We did. So we reduced. I can't talk today. We reduced the points for the education level, so it maxes out at 4. We didn't see that a master's degree is necessarily indicative of a better patrol officer, of course. And then we also separated the credits. So you need 60 post-secondary education credits within 5 years of employment. We don't require those for hire, but we do give points if you have that or an associate's degree from those credits. And the GPA points have been reduced as well.
Okay, this is great. So it sounds like we've got a couple recommendations. One is to think about like the long-term building relationships to get more applicants. The second is making sure they get through the process. But the other things to think about is actually making sure they would, what you can do to make sure that they might accept an offer if you make it. What's the value proposition? Is this an enticing police agency to work at? What opportunities will they have for professional development? All of those things. And then, of course, down the road, retention. But that's a lot for one meeting today. But I just want to put those on your radar.
Yep, and those are definitely things that we talk about in the chief's interview, which is later on in the process, of course. But we certainly talk up our agency, and I think rightfully so. We're very proud of what we have at the agency and our retention for that matter too. I tell everybody in our chief's interviews, I think in my career, which is going on, I'm in my 19th year, excuse me, we've had now just, excuse me, 3 officers in that time that have resigned to take jobs elsewhere, only one of which took a job, 2 which took jobs as police officers elsewhere, and one of them followed family. So I think we do a pretty good job of retention.
It seems like there's a very collegial environment, and I give you a lot of credit because that's not always easy to
Sure.
create.
And Laura, one of the challenges, and I think I've brought this up before, is we're competing with Madison in the sheriff's department, who have a lot more opportunities, and they have 400, 500 officers. They pay more. There's college incentives. So a lot of those minority candidates that, again, we're all fighting for are looking at the bigger agencies because of the different opportunities. So that's one of our challenges too, is to get them to pay attention to our department and to apply when there's two local agencies that provide a lot more opportunities and better pay than Middleton does. So that's one of our challenges.
Absolutely. So what's special? I mean, but you could offer something that's different, maybe something unique, and I'll let you figure out what that is, but it's a smaller agency. One person can make such a big difference for the police force and for our community, and just, maybe they would have opportunities to be leaders in the police department in unique ways that they wouldn't elsewhere, like maybe re-envisioning the community police academy, and I think people would get really excited about that. But you can come up with maybe some alternatives to my suggestion, but that could be helpful. And I struggle too. I'm always trying to recruit them away from Michigan and Georgia Tech, and it's really hard. Paul?
Brian, this is more of a question for you. None of us are vocational hiring experts. You're the closest thing we'd have to that. Do you think the city'd ever consider, because it sounds like it's not just the police department that has trouble attracting a diverse pool of applicants and then going ahead to hire people of color? Is it worth hiring a consulting firm to come in and look at the system and to give some ideas, not just for the police department, but for the whole works? Is that something that you think would fly?
Right now, Mike Davis is working with the Middleton Diversity and Equity team. We have a team within the staff. I'm a part of that, along with a number of the other directors and department heads. And we have started to look at that. We're diving into a strategic planning process. And I really do think that part of that strategic planning process is going to address some of the diversity concerns that we want to get out there. And they may even make that recommendation that we establish a study group or hire a consultant to come in. The comment that was made earlier, the demographic for the city is not that far off from what we saw for the applications. But to get hires, you've got to outdo the basic demographic. And there's a lot of reasons for that, from a hiring dynamic and resume and applicant screening, more than we can really go into easily. But I think that some of those issues are going to come to light in the next 18 months to 24 months as we work through the strategic plan and start working towards synchronizing hiring processes and a number of other things across departments.
Well, if you ever think that a formal endorsement from this body to council or the mayor, I would certainly be willing to recommend to Laura that we put that on the agenda and do that, if you think that'd be helpful.
It may very well be. We're still a few months away from diving into the major process, but once we get there and we start looking at prioritizing efforts, that's where we would need the other commissions and committees to come in and help us sort through the many things that the city does and wants to do to build the priorities for the strategic plan.
I just wanted to mention something we do in the federal government for hiring and trying to build a more diverse workplace. We do partner with 1899 colleges and universities and HACU, which is like a Hispanic college university association of colleges and universities, sorry. And we have a pathways program where we're bringing in interns to work with us for a while. And that's been great. We can convert them to a permanent or a conditional federal position after that. So I have a couple HAKU interns who work with me. I have a Pathways intern who works with me, and they do an awesome job too. So it's been great. We've hired one on since I've been here. So I think that might be something that the city could explore.
All right. Do you need an action from us? I've sort of, this is a great discussion. Thank you, everyone. I've sort of lost track where we are in our agenda. It looks like yeah, approval of the hiring process and timetable. So it looks like we might need to take some action.
That's correct, Laura. I'd need a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just wanted to follow up because I didn't hear, will there be any reconsideration of the criteria worksheet on the scoring? Or does everybody want to approve it as is? It sounds like you do, since I heard a motion in a second.
It could be a friendly amendment to, approve it with the condition that the scores will be changed a little bit.
I'm certainly willing to entertain a friendly amendment.
Me too. How would we change the score numbers? We took some notes. There was some discussion earlier.
Would anybody consider moving more points to the life experience and cultural diversity experience?
Is that something you'd be comfortable with, Troy, taking a couple points away from work experience and moving, to maybe 12 points in some of those other categories, like 20 through 22 or 20 and 21, away from prior experience in law enforcement?
I'm not opposed to that at all. And in fact, I think if you look at previous processes, that the number for work experience as a patrol officer was a little bit lower. So I'm not opposed to that. I don't know if that will get us any further along with the candidates, diversified candidates, but it's again, not opposed to it, and it's worth a shot if that's what the commission would like us to do.
Terry, I'm going to take that as a friendly amendment from you to move points from the prior experience as a patrol officer and add them to cultural diversity experience and extracurricular involvement. Is that what you were talking about?
That will work with me.
Okay.
Jeremy, were you married to how it is right now, or are you comfortable with the movement as well? Since you're the one who's really worked hard.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with whatever you guys think would be best. I think though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, I thought you had talked about the life experience getting points instead of the extracurricular involvement.
Yeah, sorry. I have. Yes.
That was my mistake.
Life experience
Okay.
and cultural. And you're right that a couple points is not going to make much of a difference. I think but I do think that we're really heavy on previous patrol or criminal justice experience.
Sure. No, I think that's fair. So you're saying add 2 points to each of those? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
And then subtracting that from the category 11, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I can definitely do that.
And as the movement, I accept that friendly amendment.
Are we ready to vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think we all said aye. All right, so I think the motion passes. I'm definitely hearing from the committee that we want to remove as many struck barriers as possible, even if they're small, and I appreciate that sentiment. It all adds up, especially with some other efforts that have been made and others that will be made in the future. I also think that just having a position open is an on-ramp for somebody to apply, and having more on-ramps on is a good thing. So I'm glad we got that approved. All right, so I believe our last item is updates.
And Brian, if you wanted to take off, you can. I appreciate it. And just to let everybody know, if you didn't know this, Brian is our first full-time HR director for the city. So that is why he is heavily involved in this process. In the past, we had a part-time or no HR personnel for the city. So we're excited to have somebody on board to guide us, as Jeremy, Travis, and I are not experts on hiring practices. So it's nice to have somebody with that background. So thanks, Brian. Thanks for attending tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brian. HR is important. I'm glad you're here helping us.
Definitely.
City.
All right. Couple of department updates, and Laura, I will touch on that website because that is high on my list, but it's a little bit further down on my updates this evening. So just want to give everybody an update on kind of department news. It's been a few months since we've met. I think it's September. So everybody's doing well at the departments. Spirits are, I think, over well high. We're hearing morale's still good, even with everything going on in society and the SRO discussion and COVID. But I think overall the department mood is still good. Sometimes I think we'd be the last one to know about that, but overall we're hearing good things, that the staff is moving in a good direction and they're supportive of our decisions, and overall we're doing well as a department. For those that wanted to get the vaccination, they were offered the vaccination in February, and I think that was a big weight off of a lot of our staff's shoulders because of the contact with people in society that were COVID positive. We know we had those cases. So it's just nice that our staff, if they wanted it, could get the vaccination, and everybody was offered that in February. So, I kind of felt a different mood, and Jeremy and Travis can jump in here too, but I kind of felt like everybody was a little bit more upbeat, knowing that they had that opportunity to get vaccinated, and it was another layer of protection for them and for their families as they go through the everyday calls for service for law enforcement. So I was excited to get that. We were kind of waiting. There was a lot of anxiety whether there was going to be enough doses for law enforcement. We were actually in the 1B category for the longest time, which is they're just getting to 1B right now. Well, paramedics and other emergency services fought for law enforcement and for fire, because when there is a pulseless non-breather, paramedics aren't the first ones showing up, but law enforcement and firefighters were. So paramedics actually went to bat for us, saying that law enforcement and fire departments needed to be moved up in the order of vaccination. So they created a different category of 1AA, and that's what provided the opportunity for our staff to get vaccinated in February. So again, those that wanted it got it, and I think we're all pretty happy to have that vaccination for those of us who got it. And again, just another layer. We know that COVID's still there. We know that we could still be spreaders of COVID, so we're still taking our precautions. But again, it's just nice that we have that vaccination. And we're really hoping that as we move forward, we can start getting back involved in the community. I think that's been one of the biggest downfalls of COVID, is that we haven't been able to do a lot of our community outreach events, our Citizens Academy, our National Night Out, our Battle of the Badges, our Cops and Bobbers events. Those things are so key to our department and the community involvement that we pride ourselves on, that relationship building. So we're really looking forward to getting back to those programs and connecting with our community. We did try a few things. We did our National Night Out Parade. We did the holiday parade. We did the Halloween event. We were just trying to think outside the box of ways to connect with our community during COVID. And yeah, I think we could have done a little bit better job in some areas, but I think we were able to be successful with those 3 events, and we got rave reviews about all those things. And people loved our Halloween event and the kids dressing up and seeing our officers dressed up too. So we're really looking forward to getting back to some normal operations. Hopefully in 21 we'll be able to do that, and again connect with our community like we were prior to COVID. A couple new hires. So in the fall, as I mentioned earlier, we hired Dustin Hodgson. We're really excited to get him. He actually grew up in Barneveld, but went up to Marion College up in Fond du Lac to play baseball. He originally went to college to become a physical therapist, and then decided that maybe law enforcement was where he wanted to go. So he got hired with Fond du Lac PD shortly after graduating. He worked for Fond du Lac for about 18 months and decided that he wanted to get closer to home. So that's why he applied for us. I believe, and I don't have any stats to back this up, but I believe Dustin is our first Native American police officer for the police department that we've hired. And I'm even excited because with him playing baseball, he's able to play third base during our Battle of the Badges event. So that means that I get to back out and retire finally, because
You can never retire.
The old guy needs to hang up these cleats. So we're excited to have Dustin. He's been a good fit for us. And he's currently on solo patrol. He just finished up field training. He's on second shift. So if you see him out and about, if you can recognize him with his mask on, please say hi to him. And then, as I mentioned earlier too, in December, we hired Alicia Kozar after she graduated from the police academy. She went to UW-Madison and was interested in anthropology first before she decided to get into law enforcement. She is currently on day shift, field training with Officer Kim Wood, and has been a great addition to our department. Great personality, fits in with everybody. I love her tenacious attitude, and she's got a bright future with our department. Just very, very friendly, and already made connections with people in the community and with our department. So we're excited to have Alicia, and we're lucky to get her because, like I mentioned earlier, there were other departments looking to hire her. But luckily, with some of our folks working at the academy, retired and current members, we were able to. She was able to know that Middleton was the right fit for her. So we're really excited to have Alicia. And we have 2 conditional offers out. Like I said earlier, just because they're conditional offers, I won't give you much details on these 2 candidates, but right now they are going through their medical and psychological testing. They've completed the background investigation. And if they complete the psychological medical testing, we'll be able to offer them a official offer of employment. And then they would start with us on June 2nd, attend the police academy, graduate in October of this year. And then if everything goes well, they'd be solo patrol in February of 2022. So kind of a long process. We're running short 2 officers while they're in the academy. And with military leave, family leave, work comp issues, we're never at full staff, no matter how hard we try. I don't think in my 22 years with Middleton, we've ever been at 100% full staff. So that's why we, again, want to start that recruitment as soon as possible to plug any holes that we might have in the future. The school resource officer update. So Paul, feel free to hop in here to give any updates from the school board side of things if I miss anything. But the comprehensive review is recently completed. This comprehensive review involves sending surveys to students, staff, parents, and they also incorporated a bunch of focus groups, and the focus groups included people who were against the SROs and those who were in favor of it. The school district did a fantastic job of trying to involve everybody in doing truly a comprehensive review of our SRO program. Based on the preliminary data that I've seen, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of individuals who completed the survey were in support of maintaining our SRO program. And the school district plans on coming to the school board and the city council in April to provide an update, to give a presentation on the SRO position and the recommendations. I'm pretty confident, but I want to be cautiously optimistic that we'll have SROs back in the school by the end of the school year, and definitely by the beginning of the school year next year. So it's been a long process. There's been some great discussions. Dana Minogue has been fantastic to work with, asking for data, willing to listen, and I'm excited to kind of move on and move on with our SRO program and develop it into something that's acceptable for everybody in our community. Any questions on the SRO? I know that's kind of been a hot topic for a couple months.
I'm only going to chime in to say that I don't have anything to add. We were actually supposed to vote on it at the upcoming meeting this week, but because there was so much data, because of the administration, and I assume the department too, everybody did such a good job of collecting a lot of viewpoints and data that it was actually pushed off to the first week of April, when the school board will consider it. Then I think, though, there's still one more step. Then it's still got to get by city council to ask to approve the contract. So those are the 2. That's the 2-step process.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's there's a few other steps that need to take place, but I'm really happy with again the comprehensive review that the school district completed. And I've said this all along. I was supportive of whatever decision was made and what the citizens, what the parents and what the students wanted. If they wanted the SRO program to be abolished, I would have supported that. If they wanted sweeping changes, I would have supported that. And if they want to maintain the program as what appears to be the recommendation, obviously I'd be supportive of that too. So again, kudos to the school district and all the staff involved in that. I had very little involvement other than providing some data and answering some questions, but I really wanted to make sure that there was not an appearance that I was trying to influence the survey or the direction of the SRO comprehensive review.
I appreciate that update. I know reviewing the SRO programs is like one of the 3 best practices, and you were doing that before, but this I think sounds like it's much more thorough. And also I think it'll be great to build that, have that relationship that you can build with the high school students. But, I'm sure there are many in the community that are still opposed to the SRO program. And it sounds like you've been thinking a lot about building relationships with the community and thinking outside the box. And I hope that continues, because you will be able to have a chance to build a relationship with all the community members in other ways.
Thanks, Laura. A couple other updates. So we have started to take our complaint data to the Public Safety Committee, and they've been reviewing our complaint data since the fall. So quarterly, we are taking our complaint data to them. They're reviewing all of it. We've kind of tweaked some of the summaries a little bit based on some of the recommendations of that committee. But overall, I think that is going very well, and I think it gives another overview of our complaint process. It's not just being done internally, but also we're having another set of eyes, the committee members, to look at our complaints and again ask questions about any of our investigations and the findings of those complaint investigations. We are looking still to take our use of force data to the PSC. We're hoping to get that done this year, but based on some questions that I got from the PSC members when I initially brought this subject up, I thought it was really important to provide that foundation on use of force. There's a lot of misinformation based on movies, social media, just use of force in general. So we really thought it was important to provide that foundation for everybody on the PSC committee, so they have that, they had that information when they start reviewing these use of force incidents that we have. So we're hoping in 2021 that we can get this accomplished. We're hoping in the spring that we can have some in-person training on use of force. And then hopefully by the end of the year, we can start taking our use of force incident to the Public Safety Committee for review along with our complaints. And then lastly, Laura brought it up, our website is horrible. It has been horrible, it's outdated. It is hard to navigate. I can't even find stuff on our website when I look for it. Its useful life has long expired. So it is a goal of ours, and we actually got funding in the budget this year to update and get a new website. And part of that is I really want to launch more data on our websites, more transparency. I want to have our arrest on there. I want traffic citations, our accident data, use of force incidents and complaints. And I'm told it can be live. So every night it would update. So if a citizen wanted to look at this information, any of those stats, that they could get it and be up to date and current. So I'm hoping that our website is up and running by mid-year. I'm praying for that, because that website, again, it's horrible. And then I'm hoping by the end of the year that we can get some of that data on our website for our citizens to view at any point, as a way of, again, showing transparency and having that data out there. I don't get requested for it a lot, but I think it's really important to have it and available for folks whenever they needed to look for that information. So look for that in 2021, and I'm excited to get that website up and running. And that's kind of the quick update on the police department. I'm happy to answer any questions or any concerns.
Sorry.
Who's going to be doing your website for you?
Well, we have somebody internally who's helping us out. So Keith Cleesby is our social media guru. And so he's kind of taking the lead from the police department standpoint, but the city contracted out with a company who does the city's website. And I think this is a good time. They're doing like a review of the entire city's website and the platform, and then they're going to incorporate the police department into that too. So it's going to be connected with the city website, but it'll have its own kind of site and location. Stuff that they toss out words, Terry, that I have no clue what they're talking about, but I know it's going to look pretty cool when it's done. So
Good. I'm glad that you mentioned sharing data and transparency. I think that's so important. I know that before we've talked about the annual report and getting the data transparently presented there, but I'm glad that it sounds like the new website, that you'll have that available more on demand, or periodically. People won't have to wait for the annual report to go through the report. I think that's fantastic. Transparency and methods of accountability is really how you build trust with the community. And, I think trust needs to be built with some people. And I think these are all good elements that are really necessary to just kind of move things forward and kind of come back stronger, especially after the pandemic. It'll be really great to have the website. I see those new capabilities as being really important to getting where you want to go.
Thanks, Laura. Yes, I agree. And I want to remove my picture off of that website. I think people just get turned off by clicking on the website and see me there. So no, I think it is so outdated. And Travis, I think you helped develop that back in the day. And I think it's from the early 2000s. And it just wasn't a priority for the department, but it was a priority for me. And that's why we got money for the budget this year to get that updated.
Travis,
really
if you
hasn't-
did that in the early 2000s, congratulations. That would have been awesome then. So thanks for all your work on it back then.
Well, it looks a lot better now than even when I, way back then, but it hasn't really changed in 10 years and it definitely needs an upgrade.
Any other questions on department issues, concerns?
I was just kind of curious about if there are any call trends lately. I know that there were more domestics this summer. I looked at some like Wisconsin EMS data, and it looked kind of like domestics were kind of seasonal, peaking in the summer, and I was a little surprised. Maybe they're coming down, but maybe it's a time to kind of get the PSAs out for spring. But I just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, that's a great point, Laura. And I forgot to include some of the call data. Our domestics were up last year, so we average about 120 domestics a year, and we're at 180. And I believe a contributing factor was COVID. And people were really locked up. Anxiety was super high. Our mental health calls were up, and some pretty significant mental health calls that I haven't seen in my career. Very alarming, self-harming type of calls. So I think a contributing factor was probably COVID. And I think that was across the board in law enforcement, that there was an increase in domestics, but overall across the country, crime rates are up. We saw an increase in gun violence in not only Madison, but we saw gun violence in Middleton that we have not seen in my 22 years with Middleton. And in a 3-week stretch, I think we had 3 or 4 shooting incidents, which again it's really unheard of in our community. So across the country, crime rates are up. And I think what they're seeing is a contributing factor is COVID and how people are locked up and just the anxiety levels are so high. Jeremy, Travis, anything else to add to our calls? Am I missing anything? Those are the two that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I think that the mental health is really what stood out last year, and kind of lately it's even peaked in the last couple of months again. We've had a number of suicide attempts, unfortunately. So we have as part of our neighborhood officer program, a really high emphasis on mental health and getting those people help, and a lot more assignments in the last few months for mental health concerns. So we're trying to stay ahead of that. And if we see someone that needs that help in the community, we assign an officer to meet with them, not only people who are suicidal, but just having general mental health concerns. And we try to be proactive if we can.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. Are there any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we can move to adjourn if there's a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right, that was unanimous. Great, thank you. It was nice seeing you all again. Have
Thanks,
a lovely
everyone.
night.
Appreciate it.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.